Evening, my name is Helen Anthony. I'm the chair of the Committee on Finance. I'm calling to order our regular meeting on Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025 at 5:36 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chairwoman Anthony,
Present.
Vice Chairman Taylor,
Here.
Counselor Andy Bloss. Here. Councilwoman Graves,
Here.
Counselor Sanchez.
Present.
We have 5 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Ken Cheverini, who's here from the City Solicitor's Office. Gina Costa, our auditor, is here. Thank you very much. We have Oscar Vargas joining us this evening. And of course, we have our wonderful clerks, Donna and Carissa, who are always happy, friendly, and diligent. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, Madam Clerk, could you please read agenda item number 1?
Communication from His Honor the Mayor dated March 24th, 2025, informing the honorable members of the City Council that pursuant to Section 302B of the Providence Home Rule Charter of 1980, as amended in Public Law Chapter 45 through 50, Sections 1 through 31, passed in 1987, he is this day appointing Justin DeShaw of 62 Alumni Avenue, Providence, Rhode Island, 02906, as a member of the Providence Public Building Authority for a term to expire on January 31st, 2030, and respectfully the same for your approval. Mr. DeShaw replaces Mr. Kilbridge, who is resigned.
Wonderful. Mr. DeShaw, if you wouldn't mind coming to join us at the table, but we'll swear you in first, so if you can remain standing, that would be great.
Please raise your right hand. Please swear on the penalty of perjury that testimony you about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but.
I do.
And please state your name for the record.
Justin Hobbs to show.
Thank you so much for coming this evening. We certainly appreciate your willingness to serve on the Providence Public Building Authority. And we would love just a little short synopsis of your background and why it is you would like to serve.
Certainly. So I've spent most of my adult career in banking, all commercial banking. Started out with Bank of Boston in Boston, which became Fleet, which then became Bank of America. And it was the Fleet acquisition of Bank of Boston that brought myself and then just my wife down here to Providence, where my wife, despite plenty of opportunities to leave the city for career advancement, said we are not leaving, and we've been there ever since. We've got 3 children that have been born and raised in the city. All 3 have or are going to classical high school, and 2 are in college or out of college. The other one is left. I got to get him through. So, but I've spent my entire career in finance. Early in my career, I first started with Arthur Anderson as a staff auditor, and actually joined the Wealth Administration very briefly under Charlie Baker. I was the capital planning director for Charlie's office. So that's it in a nutshell.
And tell us why you would like to serve on the public.
So the city, it needs active residents, citizens. It can't operate just by letting assuming that with all due respect, the elected officials and executives in charge of the city can just operate in the vacuum. It needs active members, and I see this in schools much as anything. We all know full well parent involvement in schools is critical to success of a school. I say that the same with city government and state government. Citizen involvement is critical. And so I asked the mayor, and he kindly complied. How can I get more involved?
Well, I certainly appreciate it. We have had I'm just going to be honest with you. I think we have had the PPDA before us recently on an issue, and I will say that there isn't a lot of, I don't think, necessarily communication and transparency between the PBDA and at least Finance Committee and maybe County. And so I know we've had some new appointees, thrilled with the appointees, you being one of them, and, I'm just looking forward to a new era of communication, not that we need to be, I don't think, answering us the call, but we do like to make sure that, you know, the processes that you use are at least compliant with the work contract and supplier requirements and things like that. I know that's not even necessarily right now a requirement for the PBBA, but I'm hoping that it does become somewhat of a requirement. So anyway, I look forward to a new relationship with your organization or the committee that you're gonna be serving on. And, I, think your resume is excellent. And I'm just gonna turn it over to our committee members in case you have any comments or questions. Yes.
I don't, yeah, I really don't have, thank you, I really don't have any question. I want to add my voice with the chairperson. I'm looking forward to a lot more transparency in all of the other boards and committees that we work with. But, after looking at your resume, I have to say that I am impressed with some of the, volunteer work that you've done. And so because I think sometimes we like to pull out all the bankers and, you know, all these people that we think can bring money to it or bring, the upper echelon to it, but sometimes we need to know that they understand what is going on for everyone else. And these things show that you're well-rounded in that regard. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate it too, because it says a lot about a person when they're willing to give up their time for non-paying, volunteering, and just giving of their house.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Any more questions or comments? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve number one.
Second.
Okay, the motion is made by Councilor Taylor, seconded by Councilor Graves, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We will be recommending your approval at our next council meeting.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you
your
so
time.
much. We
Thank you.
appreciate your service, willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to waive the readings of items 2 through 6? Motion made by Councilor Ansel, seconded by Councilor Taylor, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, and, we are going to invite, we have our 18 here tonight. We have, Sarah Silveria, Director of Finance, Crystal Limber, Deputy Finance Director, Gordon Houghton, Chief Operating Officer. Anyone else that's presenting tonight? We'll see. We'll swear you in. You want to be sworn in case we have to throw a question your way? Okay, thank you.
Raise your right hands. Please swear to have the authority of testimony you're about to give is truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. Please state your names and titles for the record. Crystal Limber, Deputy Finance Director and Budget Officer. Sarah Silveria, Finance Director. Courtney Hawkins, Chief Operating.
Okay. Who's going to lead tonight?
Gonna be me today. If everybody's ready.
Thank you.
I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. Do all of you members have a? Okay.
Before you start, if I could, please have a motion mark this as exhibit number 1.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilor Gray, seconded by, Councilor Sanchez. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Please proceed.
Okay, well, I think let's start by first walking you guys through these large books that you have been gifted from the finance department yesterday. These are very important documents, and I'm hoping that you can kind of continue to use them as a guide. In previous years, we were reprinting the same information that was in these books, and it's just, it's not only a little bit labor intensive, but while we were going through our line items, the one line item I couldn't reduce was copier and print machine. And it's just going up and up and up. So we're trying to do our part to like mitigate that cost as much as possible. And I have spares, so if you guys forget or whatever, we've got some downstairs we can bring up for you, but we will continue to provide materials that are not in these books, overviews, summaries of each department. But the individual line item detail will be referenced in this book.
And if you don't mind me interrupting, so if you don't want to take yours home, I know our folks will be happy to make sure that you have yours with you at every meeting. So you can take it home, but then you have to bring it back for the meeting, or you can leave it with the clerks and then hold it, and you can have it to refer to during the meetings. Thank you.
Of course. So in addition to the budget book, which has all of our line by line details, some department descriptions, a lot of very helpful information. You have another book that's referred to as our proposed municipal ordinances. These are the same ordinances that are in this agenda packet, but they've been bound and put in a package so that they're easy to reference and flip through or take notes on if you have any adjustments or questions on any line items in here. The last book is what's known as our personnel supplement. This lists every allowed and funded position in the city of Providence, along with an annual salary associated with each of those positions. So if you have any questions on the mix of those numbers, please let me know, but they're very good points of reference for you to understand what is making up the $624 million operating budget. So in summary, well, actually, one more thing I want to highlight. You all see Sarah and me and Larry very regularly, but there's another really critical member of the budget team who is not at the table today, but we're not on the budget if she was not here. Kelly Duran is our budget analyst. We are a team of two building this budget. And so I can say with all certainty that I would not be here today at this moment without her. And her work is incredible. So we're trying to get her a little more acclimated to the committee, and she may be attending some of these sessions to get more comfortable and see this side of things instead of just, behind the screen, building it all out. So, welcome.
Welcome.
Okay, so we have a total operating proposed budget in front of us of $624 million. It is approximately a 4% increase over fiscal year 25, which is about $24.4 million. This budget is built with a levy increase of 7.5%, which is within the guidelines set by the City Council resolution, which established an 8% on the total levy. In addition, this is a balanced budget, which is very important and it's very hard to achieve. And it includes a $100,000 appropriation to the rainy day fund, which is required by ordinance. So we are required to make some contribution to the rainy day fund. Typically, in years when the budget has been tight, like this year, we have done a nominal $100,000 contribution to meet that threshold. And there's hopes and anticipation that through careful budget management, perhaps we can contribute more to the rainy day fund. But we don't want to earmark funds for that purpose at this point.
Would you prefer, would you mind if we ask her to
Oh,
come
no,
along
please
way?
do,
Because-
yeah.
All right, yes, Council Gray.
So if we're just doing the basic, is that gonna mess with our rating? Because I heard we had an A+ rating.
Credit rating?
Yes,
Yes, so the credit rating, I think.
for the rainy
is-
day.
Are you worried about it being too little or too
Yeah.
little? We're just worried about whether the 100K is enough so that it preserves our credit rating.
Yes, it does. So the most recent credit rating we received had noted our reserves as a positive impact on our rating. It did not make any assertions or assumptions of like what we would need to continue to contribute to get there. What it did say is that dipping into that would result in a reduction in our credit rating.
Okay,
So we feel confident in finance that keeping this $100,000 appropriation will preserve that existing credit rating.
thank you.
We'll give you a handout. Did you have any other questions?
No.
I'm sorry. No, I'm glad you, no, please. I think it's important that we, if you don't mind, we'll be interrupting.
Please do, yeah, it's a very important budget, and I think sometimes it makes more sense to ask the question of the relevant topic.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I'm sorry.
I'll raise my hand too. Crystal's in charge right now, so. Can you just explain, how our budget increase is, 4%, so 24.4 over the fiscal year? But the tax, levy is increasing by 7.5%. Like, what's the difference in that math?
You know, it's kind of comparing apples to oranges,
It's
right?
like two
Because-
different.
Yeah, it's two different, it's two kind of different pots of money. If you go to slide 5, you'll see that our levy is $425 million. But we actually have $624 million in budgeted revenue.
Okay,
So when we're looking at the total budget change, that 7.5 on the levy is most likely being reduced by other revenues that have decreased.
Right. okay, thank you.
Before we go to the next page. Okay.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, this was a really tricky budget to balance, and we did that with a kind of three-pronged approach. The first was to really dig into the operating budget, look at our department line items, and responsibly cut where possible without reducing customer or resident-facing services. That resulted in a reduction of 23.84 positions. That group 4 is a little tricky because it has to do with how we grant fund some of our employees, which included 13 non-union positions. It also included service and supply cuts in almost every single department. So as we go through each department, you will see, even finance was not exempt from this. Everywhere we could reduce spending in a line item, we did. In addition, okay,
Still on 3.
we're still on 3.
Okay.
Ah.
Go right ahead.
In addition to that, we did a full analysis to see if there was any new departmental revenues or trends in revenue that we could utilize to help offset any additional tax increase. And as a result, we were able to find almost $5 million in new non-tax revenue. And the bulk of this budget was balanced using an adjusted tax rate, which is about $23.7 million.
Anyone have any questions on this part? So just to be clear, I'm just gonna state the obvious, most of this, balancing is done from the property tax.
Correct.
Okay, yes, and that revenue is, I'm sure we'll get into the detail of the new revenue.
Yeah.
What constitutes that, but also the other cuts, and we just bring the 24% of the 9.4 million is what we're gonna see already cut in the budget you are presenting, but most of the 62% is gonna be on property tax.
Correct, yeah, and that is because taxes are our largest source of revenue.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of the other revenues we don't necessarily have control over. We can't dictate, how many parking permits are paid in a particular year, or how many speed camera tickets are issued. We can manage that and try to do, operational changes to bring in more revenue. But there's only so much we can do with the revenue streams.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilor Vargas.
Thank you, Anja. And these new revenue, are you including the new fees, the new, for example, the new parking tickets that we
No.
trying to raise?
No, this does not include any revenues that have not been approved by the General Assembly that are pending. So this does include the ordinance updates, the fines and fees study
Fines
that
and
the
fees,
mayor's
yeah.
office did. This does include any changes from that exercise that could be done in-house internally that didn't require state legislative changes. But the new revenues that would require legislative changes are not included in this budget.
But so these 14% might change to 17% if the legislators approve.
Depending upon what they approve and when they approve it, yes, some of the revenues that we would be seeking, like the parking tax legislation, is gonna require some time to implement. So we can't assume that like, if we're assuming we're gonna generate $1 million in revenue annually from that program, if the General Assembly passes that legislation in May, I think it's highly unlikely that the program will be up and running, ready to go on 7/1. It's going to take time for us to, or the state to build that program out. So we would be looking at maybe the soonest will probably be January 1st of 2025 that we could start counting on that. So once we get through that, or 26, I'm sorry. But once we get through that and we know kind of what's approved, what's not approved, that's when we would sit down, do the analysis and really determine what revenue we could generate from that, and we would add that into the proposal.
Thank you.
Okay, All right, thank you.
Okay, so, the fiscal year 2025 adopted levy was $396 million. The proposed levy for fiscal year 2026 is $425 million. That's a $30 million change year over year, or 7.5%. Now, one thing I'd like to note is that if you look at property taxes in particular, the levy change in that category is 5%. So it is a little bit below the total levy increase. And that is because the tangible tax, assessed values grew by enough to help offset some of the need to increase the tax rates on the residential categories. Right?
Are we gonna get into detail on that group, by that amount?
We could bring the assessor, and I didn't plan on talking about assessed values, but it's exclusively value based. The tangible tax rate did not change. The exemption for tangible taxes did not change. So really, the assessed values just grew that much in that year during the time.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can have her do a breakdown of kind of like how the tangible accounts have changed from one year to the next.
So I was just surprised that I did not expect. Yes, I mean, that would be helpful. I'm not gonna take away anything. If we could have that distributed to the finance committee, that would be great.
Certainly. So if we break this $29 million down, we know that the maximum we could generate under the 4% tax levy cap is $15.8 million. That means that we have approximately $13.8 million in our levy that is above and beyond the 4% tax cap. That is roughly 3.5% of the levy. Slide 6. So one of the major changes in this tax rate categorization is the new residential categories. So as you can see, the 6 to 10 unit properties and 11 plus unit properties are now under the residential category. They were previously taxed at the commercial rate. So if we go down the list line by line, we can see that the owner-occupied residential tax rate has gone from $10.46 per thousand down to $8.25 per thousand, which is a reduction of $2.21 or 21%. The non-owner occupied tax rate has gone down from $18.35 to $14.40, which is a change of $3.95 or 22%. These 6 to 10 units, and again, this was previously assigned the commercial tax rate, has gone from $35.10 down to $24.50. That is a change of $10.60 or 30%. And residential properties with 11 or more units was previously taxed at the commercial rate of $35.10, is now at the residential rate of $27.75. It is a change of $7.35 and a reduction of 21%. Commercial tax rate has changed from $35.10 to $28.80. That is a reduction of $6.30 or 18%. And the tangible tax rate has remained flat at $53.40.
Okay, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this is, I appreciate the comparison. I think it's hard to look at this chart without, we've had such an incredible increase in valuations. And I think we are going to be talking about, I can see.
Yeah, there's some slides in here on how this impacts the tax bill and values, and the rates are above that, so you can see.
Thank you. Okay, yes, Councilor Rainbow.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for raising this. This is so helpful. So just to say that first. The question I had is when we talked about the budget ahead of time, and I'm seeing it on a future slide, there is a section for 2 to 5 units, and I don't see that on this section here. Is there a different tax rate for 2 to 5?
There's not.
Okay.
So 2 to 5 units are included in the either the residential owner occupied or the residential non-owner occupied.
Okay.
And that has been the case as long as I've
forever.
been.
I just don't know
forever.
if that's broken out differently.
Yeah, and that's part of why this gets a little tricky.
Okay.
It's because they are lumped in, and now that the 6 to 10 units are broken out and the 11 plus are broken out, it does kind of seem, you
Yeah,
know, weird to see the 2 to 5 lumped in with the
With the-
single
yeah.
families, yes.
and they're called out separately on other slides, so I didn't know if it was just, I'll ask those questions on the future.
Yeah, we're showing them differently on the slides because the values have changed so dramatically
In
between
the
those
different
types
types
of
of
properties. Yeah, so it's helpful to provide kind of the breakout of that. Owner occupied and non-owner occupied, so you can see the impact to a single family versus the condo versus the 2 to 5.
That's helpful.
Mhm.
Okay.
So another thing to keep in mind when it comes to these tax rates is there's state law that, defines the maximum ratio between commercial property taxes and residential property taxes, particularly the owner occupied tax rate and the non-owner occupied tax rate. So the owner occupied tax rate, the commercial rate cannot be more than 3.5 times the owner occupied tax rate or 2 times the non-owner. So if you flip back to the tax rate page before us, you can see that the commercial tax rate of 2880 is exactly 2 times the non-owner occupied tax rate.
So,
Yes, please, Councilor Sanchez.
just, a friendly reminder, so before this year that we're breaking it up, anything above 6 residential units was taxed at commercial rate?
Correct.
Right, okay, thank you.
Well, that's Councilor Royce has joined us, I would like to say on the record, thank you very much. And he has a question.
Yeah, I don't know if it's probably more of a statement out loud than a question, I think, but. Maybe I'm viewing this differently here, but. For 6 to 10 units. Or 6 and above, right, has now fallen under the residential tax rate because we. It just gives me pause, you know, to be honest, about. Just how commercial landlords are receiving the same tax rate than like a,
Residential.
yeah, I guess it's low, it should be lower, you know, that's, sorry, that's just a thought, like,
No, I-
Councilor Engerbach has.
I have it, because I shared that concern, and then in the tax commission in 2023, I thought it was really helpful hearing from folks about like. We have such a high percentage of renters and renters who live in those buildings, and the landlords are passing on those higher costs to the renters, so the renters effectively have been paying the commercial, like roughly the commercial rate, instead of like, I own my own house, I've been paying 10.46 or whatever, they've been paying the commercial rate, and it's just like. There is an assumption, hopefully, that there's less cost savings that are passed on, or at least like it's less increase driven by and you know, that's an assumption. Maybe they will just continue, you know, there's no requirement that they don't keep gouging, but, it's making our renters pay the commercial rate as opposed to, so I both hear it and like, it's tough, because then people who can't afford to own their own house or to have a single family or 2 to 5 are paying a much higher rate than everybody else.
yeah.
It's just not, yeah.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you. Just to add to the conversation, I think this is a pretty good recommendation
Yeah.
from that came out of the tax commission. They're not paying the full commercial rate, but they're not paying what you would pay as a one family household. I think adding separate tax rates, I think it's actually a pretty good idea, direction that we're moving in.
Thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna, yes, Councilor Vargas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question is like, so the 6 to 10 units, right? They're going to be calling residential tax rate. But the real book is commercial? It's a commercial building?
No.
It's not a commercial building.
No, if it's a residential property, if it has like apartments in it, it would be considered a residential property and would be taxed at that residential rate. If it's a mixed use building, is that what you're talking about, like apartments on top, businesses on the bottom? So in that instance, the assessor apportions the value to the appropriate sections of the property, the piece of the property value that is attributed to the apartments or residential component of the building is charged at the appropriate residential tax rate, and the portion of the building that is for commercial purposes is charged at the commercial tax rate.
Go ahead.
Yes, auditor.
Or,
I just want to confirm that the 6 to 10, 11 plus units are not eligible for owner occupied, they don't have any other exemption.
No,
Correct.
correct.
thank you.
Yes.
for that
What
clarification.
I would question against would be perhaps, well, yes, that's correct. They cannot receive the owner occupied tax rate for it.
And did you want to respond at all to the breakout of the, 6 to 10? I didn't know if you needed, we discussed it, but is there anything you want to get into that conversation?
No, I think I kind of agree with what everybody said here. I know that in the tax commission has probably studied this. If you look historically how Providence has built its levy, the plan has been to reduce the owner occupied and single family residential rates and continue to try to keep that commercial rate as high as possible. And I am not a data scientist in any stretch of the imagination, but I do know that we are in a bit of a rent. So I do know that what we have historically been doing is not solving that problem. And so this approach to changing the approach, I would hope would start to move the needle in the right direction.
Yes. Counselor Parker.
Thank you. Because one thing we have to be aware is the value of these properties. They skyrocket and is it great that came out that a tax commission 6 to 10 units, it will be paying $24.50 on residential rate. But the value of these 10 units is around $3 million or more. So that's a thing that we have to see how we want to figure out, and we're going to be the, or we're not going to be burning them or going. No, because what we're trying to do with this here is to protect the renters. And God bless if they got a lease for 5 years. They're not gonna be able to get out of this lease, even with this new tax rate.
And I think we're gonna get into some of those on page 9.
We're almost there.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so we can move past that and we're going to talk about that. Before we get into the business, I just wanted to talk about the tax exemptions. So these are exemptions that are applied to the value of your property on your tax bill. But this table demonstrates the applicable dollar value that you will save on your tax bill. So this year, the mayor's proposed budget is increasing the elderly exemption by 25% to $750. That is a $150 increase. It is also doubling the veteran exemptions, and so the veteran and widower veteran is going up to $306, and the disabled veteran exemption is going up to $614. All other exemptions are remaining at the same amount for fiscal 2020.
Set a question, a couple of questions. I'm sorry, the social security exemption is. What is that? I'm sorry, I'm having a blank.
So if you are on social security and you are between ages 62 and 64, you're eligible for a $460 exemption.
And is that in addition to the elderly exemption?
Well, you must be 65 and over to get the elderly exemption,
Right.
and so you get one or the other.
Okay, and then is it at all income based?
No, it is not at all income based. It is a flat dollar value,
Okay,
and then it is, so you end up saving $750 on your tax bill if you get the elderly exemption, and the assessor determines that amount based on your assessed value.
okay. And then just to be clear, everyone has to apply for these accounts.
Correct. Yes,
Okay, I'm sorry, Madam Auditor.
Do you have the count for each of those categories?
I don't have them with me, but I can get them.
Thank you.
Any questions? Yeah. Yes, Ken, we'll go to.
I think we just first, but, there's no combination of these things. It has to be one or the other.
No, there can be some combination. So for example, if you were blind and elderly, you would be eligible for both of those exemptions.
Okay. And how do you handle joint ownership.
Mhm.
We require both, I mean, to receive the exemptions, for you to consider each individual.
No, it's applied to the whole property, so if one of the owners is eligible, the property, that's it, yeah, it's not- it's not finished.
Yes.
So elderly and veteran, they're combined, right?
Yes, you could be elderly and a veteran.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I think it would be really, I think this year in particular, I'm thinking that we really need to make, let's have some very good communication around the exemptions this year and how to apply.
Yeah.
Anyway, Councilor Vargas, did you have a question?
Yeah, the question was, social security, disability and the age, they can combine those two?
No, you cannot combine those two. So
Can be
if
used
you-
only one?
I'm sorry, you can only have one of the social security.
Because of the age, 162 to 64, and then the other one is 65 plus.
Okay,
Yes, and then there's one if you are, let's just say, under 62, or maybe even over 62 and fully disabled on social security, that's what the social security / disability is for.
can I know a question?
Yes.
So let's say I figure out I became 65 in 3 months, can I apply?
In 3 months? I
In the elderly age?
think you have to apply once you hit the age.
When you hit the age,
Yeah.
you can apply, you will qualify.
Exactly, yes. So if you turn 65 on July 1st, you should come down to the assessor's office and drop off your.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, that's your question. please.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, we're really doing a deep dive.
We're really
on that.
being. Do you have to drop off the applications physically?
I believe at this point in time, you do have to drop them off, but we could work with the assessor on creating some sort of online form. That's-
Or folks have mailed it in, like I know I have a constituent who is both elderly and legally blind and like just can't get to City Hall. I think last time I drove her, like that's not sustainable.
No, definitely not. We're open to make this process as accessible as possible.
Yes, Councilor Graves.
What about the people that have it taken automatically with their mortgage, your mortgage company does that?
Escrow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So what would happen is, you would send your exemption request into the assessor's office, and when your tax bill, is generated, most mortgage companies receive a copy of that tax bill directly from the city or town office.
okay,
Some taxpayers opt to send that bill to their mortgage company as well, to be extra cautious.
Mhm.
And then they will appropriately adjust your escrow balance and escrow contributions based on your adjusted tax.
I think you guys have to come out to my community meeting.
Yeah. I think it's important this year for sure. Yes, Madam Auditor.
If anyone has any questions about any specific constituents, you can call my office. We do have access to it, so we can look it up for you, so we don't inundate the tax assessor, especially now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilor Reyes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, if this wasn't meant to be a deep dive. If you could clarify. If we come up with a scenario where there would be, you could apply 2 exemptions. And I think you were saying, correct me if I'm wrong, if 2 exemptions apply to a particular person. The grayest would apply. But, or do they get served the, is there like a, total of 2 exemptions that come off the bill? Is that,
Like, on the bill presentation, are you saying, or?
I'm sorry, the tax exemptions, like oh, what am I trying to say? Sorry, y'all.
I think
I
I
think he's
know.
trying to
what
say,
you asked.
if you're blind, you're over 65 and you're a veteran, can you put all 3 of those together?
You sure can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
That's-
what you
Wow.
cannot do is, I think with maybe the way I framed it in my head, or the age-based kind of exemptions
Yeah.
can't be combined.
Okay,
But if they are disability-based or service-based, then that can be combined with an age-based exemption.
Okay, perfect.
Does that
Thank you.
help?
Yes.
Okay.
Great education.
Okay, are we good on tax exemptions?
Yeah.
I
All
think
right, I think this is where you all want to be, okay? Let's talk about the residential property tax impact. So first up, we have the owner occupied tax impact. As you can see, that I kind of referenced the tax rate above it, so it'd be easy to see what rate is generating this amount of revenue. Owner occupied single family residences increased in value by approximately 31% from $419,000 to $551,000. In 2025, those average single family homes were receiving a tax bill of $4,392. In 2026, they will see an average tax bill of $553, which is a change of $160, or approximately 4%. And that represents 10,989 properties in Providence. I will say that our owner occupied category of properties is overwhelmingly the majority of the property value in Providence. 2 to 5 family properties rose in value by 47% from $399,000 to $585,000. Their tax bill in 2025 is $4,176. The estimated average tax bill under the mayor's proposed rates for fiscal 26 of $4,826. That is an increase of $650 or 16%. And condos have risen in value by 22%. They've gone from $384,000 average value to $507,000 average value. The tax bill in 2025 in average is $4,000. 2026 average tax bill is reported to be at $188. It's a change of $165.64, or 4%. Are there any questions?
Yes,
So I brought this up when this came up, the owner occupied, 2 to 5 family. And it actually works with the non-owner occupied, but since we're there. So the 2 family isn't gonna be 650.2, right? It's gonna be prorated. No, the 2 family and 5 family is not gonna be 650.22.
It depends on the individual property, but yeah, presumably
So if I have a 2 family.
Yeah.
I'm gonna and he has a 5 family. I'm not paying 650, he's paying 650. He should pay 650, and I should pay 300 maybe.
It depends really on the change in that individual property's value. So we're using averages here, right? And so maybe a 2 family in one neighborhood is worth significantly less than a 2 family in another neighborhood, or a 2 family in one neighborhood could be worth more than a 5 family in another neighborhood, depending upon a lot of variables. And so, you know, I think, while in theory, yes, a 2 family would probably not see a $650 increase. That would be more likely to be in a maybe 3, 4, or 5 family. It really is going to it's going to be determined based on the actual individual property. It's
assessment.
Yeah, and I can help build like a calculator if that would be
That would
helpful,
be
where you
very
could put in the value and it can calculate what the change in the tax rate would be. So that would be a good visual for folks if you need to do like case by case examples.
I think that would be very helpful. That'd be helpful. Okay. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is it possible to do, like the average, for owner occupied and non-owner occupied? For like a 2 families, 3 families, 4 families, 5 families, instead of like lumping them all in one average? Like, I guess what, I'm just trying to understand like the reasoning.
For breaking them out like this.
Yeah,
Really, it's just how it's coded in the assessor software. That's how we typically looked at them in that way. So it wasn't necessarily a choice to present it, it's more historically how it's been presented. Especially because up until this year, the 6 to 10 units and 11 above were blended in with commercial, so it was really helpful to understand the breakdown of residential. Particularly because, as you can see, the 2 to 5 family values are changing at a
Right.
pretty dramatically different rate than the single family homes. So
Right.
breaking it out is really an effort to be more transparent, because
right,
the alternative really would be to lump it all together,
right.
which is not necessarily an accurate picture of what's happening to this pool of properties.
Just to follow up on that, if we broke it down even more, and obviously we don't want to overwhelm your office, but that 16% would go down. It would be a single percentage for each
Yeah.
type of property.
I mean, some might go down, some might go up, it would depend on
Yeah.
the ash, but it would depend on the way.
But like the overall average,
No, because
wouldn't,
Because the average is the average, so if you break it down, it's just, yeah.
Madam Moderator, did you have something?
I
you'd
just-
like to add?
I just wanted to inform the committee that, my office is working on breaking out now we need to get the updated tax roll from the assessor, and we will redistribute the new, comparison with the new rates, with the calculator. Okay, and just the 2 to 5 family is a state code. It's not just the assessor's code. I just didn't want to.
Yeah, no,
Well, underneath,
yeah.
it is a state code that's used, so I am going to ask her if she does have it broken out 2 to 5, so that may delay it if she does have it. But I will get it out as soon as possible, okay, to the entire council.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Yes, Counselor Anderson.
Thank you, this is so helpful, and just like, I promise I didn't know how to do math, but like, just to say what I think is obvious, but out loud, just to make sure, I feel like the news has been reporting that the taxes for 2 to 5 families are going up 16%, so what's really happening, but tell me this is not. What seems like it's really happening is the values of those properties just went up, the tax rate is exactly the same as single family owner, the values have gone up 16%, so there's no special tax. I think there's just been some misreporting, and that's helpful just to say out loud.
I agree with that fundamentally. I think one of the things we have to always remember is that the levy and the tax bill essentially is a math formula.
Yeah.
You know, I like math, but not everybody does.
Yeah.
And it's essentially net assessed value times tax rate.
Yeah,
So if the value goes up, the bill goes up.
yeah,
If the tax rate goes up, the bill goes up. If one goes down, they're tied together. So it's not one or the other. It is a combination of both of those things for every single property that then dictates the increase.
that's really helpful, and theoretically, if like a 2 to 5 family has gone up, let's say a 3 family, and it's gone up $600 or whatever, to make math easier, it's not like not each renter isn't paying $650 up, that's the whole property, I'm just saying this out loud to make sure I'm like not insane. So like each individual is still only increasing a certain amount, it's like shared, and so theoretically, a landlord could spread that out across the whole building and like not.
Correct.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, I just, I feel like that was obvious, but I just like wanted to say,
Not
sometimes there's
I mean,
obvious things that like you don't say out loud.
I think it's important to state that, Councilwoman, because I mean, I've had constituents reach out with their landlords increasing their rent, even just like this conversation being in the news, and I'm just like, none's even said, like, this was
Yeah.
before the mayor even submitted his budget, so I mean, in a good world, we would like to think that it would be distributed, but the reality is that landlords are increasing rent already
Yeah, in response.
by just having this conversation.
And based on the misinformation. in
Right,
the press.
right.
I'm
Yeah,
just gonna
yeah,
say-
yeah, I think the presence.
Yeah, but I'm sorry not to
And then
say
I've seen
all
that
negative
shared.
about
Yeah.
press, but we've had a lot of bad press on misstatements and also misstatements by our electeds.
Yeah.
I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I'm just saying, it's not just local electeds, it's also other electeds. So anyway,
Yeah, no, thank you. I
Councilor
appreciate it.
Vargas.
Thank you. Because it's a little confusing. Let's say the new value for a 2 to 5 families is $585,000. I got a constituent who called me that his 3-family house, they value at $750. It's not a 5-family, it's not a 5-unit building, it's a 3-family. $750, so he's talking about that is over these $585,000 assessment that we have in this bill.
Yeah.
So that's why it would be a good idea to divide them and say, look, 2-family, 3-family, 4-family, 5 families will cost all these. And see how many units we have, because now you're saying here that we have 7,149 total units. Out of those 7,000, how many 5 families do we have? It's a misconfusion. Your system is putting everything together and give you a number.
Well, it's an average.
It's like
If
an
we
average.
put all our ages on a piece of paper,
I'll be the youngest
say,
one.
everybody would be your age, you know what I mean? Poor Justin, there's not even half of it yet.
Right, well, that's why we're trying to
That's
get the
okay.
real number like.
Yeah, there's gonna be the high end of the.
And I'm just gonna add, I mean, in terms for information, I think you're saying, because we cannot at this point be changing our categories.
Yeah.
It's all, we had to go to the, as you'll recall, we had to go to the state and ask for enabling legislation last year in order to create these new classifications. And so Well, I understand it would be helpful, I think, to certainly help us educate our residents. I think it would be informational only because I don't think you're asking, we cannot create different property classifications. I
I-
just want to make sure that we know that.
I understand that point, Madam Chair. Can I ask another question?
Yes.
So to get my tax amount, I just have to take the value of my property and multiply it by 16%?
No, you would take the value of your property, you would divide it by 1,000, and you would multiply it. Is it an owner occupied property? Well, you.
And this average we are,
Yes.
will be by 8.25
Yep, so I would take my $585,000 property,
or whatever value is.
whatever value it is, I'd divide it by 1,000, and then I would multiply it by $8.25.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this page?
One other thing I just would like to point out too is one of the, while the increase to 2 to 5 families is significant and very, very steep, because it is combined with the single family and condo properties, if you were to reduce it much further, you could be in a position where single family properties are paying no or less tax. Because the reduction in that rate to bring the 2 to 5 families down to something below 16% would result in single family homes perhaps paying less in taxes if their rates, if their value did not increase by the same percentage as these multi-family.
Okay. Counselor
Is
Sanchez.
there a way you could like break that down a little bit more? Cause like that's like, that was like one of my thoughts is if the 16% goes down, then the percentage for single family and condo, whether they're owner occupied or not, would go up. So how can you,
No.
how would they go down?
It would all go down because the tax rate is applied to all of the value.
Oh, yeah.
So.
That's what's so confusing. It's
That is
like,
what's
oh my
tricky,
God.
yeah. I know, I was just gonna like.
With like Katie Porter, like.
Because I think that it helps a little bit to understand the relationship
Right.
between the assessed value and the bill itself and the tax rate. The tax rate is fixed for every property in these categories. So every single family home that is owner occupied, a 2 to 5 family home that is owner occupied, regardless of the value, is going to be paying $8.45. This increase, this dramatic increase is exclusively tied to the increase in value. It is not relative to the rate. If you wanted that increase to be less, you would have to lower the rate.
Counselor Sanchez.
So, I mean, it wouldn't even it wouldn't even be possible to like, even like, if Councilman Vargas did want to introduce legislation where it did break down single family, we wouldn't be able to do that because of the state law, right?
Correct.
Counselor Vargas,
The last one.
please. Okay, yeah.
How you got the 650 change in value?
The six.
2 to 5. So you did got a 585 divided by 1,000 multiplied by 825. That's what you got 650?
No, that's $4,826. $650 is the difference between the 25 bill of $4,176 and the
Oh,
26 bill
that
of
2 years.
4,000.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. All right, I think we're done on this.
Yes.
Feet to the ground.
We're good? Excellent. Okay, so.
We're gonna try to make our streamline our questions moving forward, I'm just saying, I want everyone to ask their questions, so. But I just wanna keep in mind that we're on page 10 and we have to get to page
22.
22, thank you. All right.
I'll try to be quick. Okay, so this slide addresses the new categories of residential property. As we mentioned earlier, 6 to 10 units are a new category. They are going down to 2,450 to 4,000. The average assessed value for these properties in fiscal 2025 was about $700,000. It is going up to $947,000. It's an increase of 36%. In fiscal year 2025, these properties received an average tax bill of $24,382. In 2026, we estimate this average tax bill to be $23,225. That is a reduction of $1,156 or 5%, and that is impacting 379 properties. The next and final category in the residential bucket is, the 11 and above units properties. They are assigned a tax rate of 27.75 per thousand. The average assessed value on these properties was $3.7 million in fiscal year 2024. It has increased to $4.8 million in 2026. That is an increase of 28%. In fiscal 2025, their average tax bill was $132,391. In fiscal year 2026, that bill will go up to $134,091.36. It's a change of $1,699 for approximately 1%, and that is impacting 133 properties in the city.
I'm sorry, yes, Council Sanchez.
Just to confirm, so these two categories don't play a role in the state law equation?
In the ratio restriction,
Yeah.
correct, yes,
They do or they don't?
they do not. So the commercial rate is tied to the non-owner occupied and the owner occupied tax rate. There is no relationship between this category and commercial tax rate.
So just to confirm on the auditor's point that owner occupied or non-owner occupied does not apply to these two categories.
Correct. Final property tax rate we have on slide 11 is the commercial property tax. The 2026 proposed rate is $28.80 per thousand. In fiscal 2020.
Yeah, I have it here. It's not the same.
I copied the wrong one, right? Yep.
It's all right.
The average rental value is $713,260. In 2026, it's $855,368. That's an increase of 20%. The average tax bill for these properties in fiscal 2025 was $25,035.43. It is going down to $24,634.60, and that is a reduction of $400.83, or a change of negative 2%.
Can you run
I
that?
will update this and resend.
So this page 11 is.
It's incorrect on the, I copied and pasted the wrong.
Yeah,
chart.
that's all
But
right.
I'll update the chart and I will resubmit this to the clerk so that the updated version is available.
No, we have it on, we can have it.
This is from the previous.
Oh, right.
We don't have that with us. This was just from the previous conversation.
And there are 2,287 properties.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, in this category?
Yes. And I think one thing to keep in mind is now that we've pulled out the large apartment buildings from this category, many of these businesses are kind of local, small businesses in various neighborhoods and are really an integral part of the community.
The 2880 is the thing,
The 2880.
is correct.
All right. Okay, thank you. All right, so that will be substituted. Okay.
Okay, so that is the impact of these rates on the tax base. Now we need to transition to the operating budget and how this impacts our tax revenue. In fiscal year 2025, we had total current tax revenue of $373 million. In fiscal 2026, we're proposing total tax revenue of $396,104,605. That is an increase in tax revenue of $22,665,933. The proportion of this revenue that relates to the 4% tax cap is $14,739.51. And the proposed tax revenue above the tax cap is $12,889,283. What $12,889,283? Part of the change in this revenue is there was a reduction in the collection rate. It has been reduced from 94.25 to 93%, which is a reduction of 1.25%.
And why was that?
It was done for two reasons. One is that these values are high, and we anticipate that there will be a significant amount of appeals that will come in, and typically in reval years, we are analyzing the collection rate and trying to put some buffer in there for those appeals that come through. But the biggest reason for this is the, conversion of Roger Williams Medical Center to a nonprofit entity. Right now, our tax stabilization revenue in the fiscal 2026 budget is assuming that we were receiving $5.9 million from that entity in fiscal year 2026. And that is possible, and we will be doing all we legally can to obtain that revenue, but there is a likelihood that we will not be receiving it. And so out of an abundance of caution, we would like to ensure that the budget is insulated from that very, very large risk.
Counselor. Great.
With that being said, do you think, because it sounds like you're only going down, you said it's 94, you're going down to 93, is that enough to incorporate that 5 million?
Yes, so right now with at 93%, we have about $5.3 million in that pool available to offset the hit of $5.9 million.
Okay.
That hit is that hit. If it happens in 26 or it happens in 27, it's gonna be a hit that we take.
Yeah.
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Let's go ready for 13.
Ready for 13. Okay. Total state revenues have also decreased, or have decreased this year by $1.2 million from fiscal 2025. A breakdown of the various accounts that have changed are included here. I did not include accounts that have not changed year over year. We are seeing a small pickup in the pilot payment from the state of Rhode Island. We are seeing a significant reduction in our school debt construction reimbursements, and that has to do with the timing of our school projects and when they are and are not coming online. Distressed city revenue has been reduced for the governor's formula. There are modest increases in meal and beverage tax and room tax. And the tangible tax exemption reimbursement at $6.1 million is something that the city fought very hard to clarify and rectify in fiscal year 2025. And so we will continue to see that $6.1 million in perpetuity.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Can I just ask about the school debt construction payments? Why is that? And you said it was due to timing?
Yeah, so the reimbursement on school debt construction is based on project completion. And so we have several projects, very large projects that we've taken bonds out for that will be completing next fiscal year in fiscal year 2026. So we will expect that this number will jump dramatically in fiscal year 2027 when those projects come on.
Okay, and Councilor Sanchez.
Just to build off of that question, so I think we're okay with this dollar amount until I think 2030 is probably when we're done building schools in Providence. What happens then though to that huge contribution from the state?
Well, the revenue would go with sort of the expense because.
So that revenue is tied to paying for the bond?
Exactly,
Okay.
yep. So the way this works is, we pay the debt on the bond, so let's just say it's a bond payment of $60 million. We issue that payment, we send it to the trustee. We then inform the Rhode Island Health and Building and Education Corporation, known as REDEC. They confirm receipt of those funds and they reimburse us for their appropriate percentage, anywhere from 80 to 91% of that $60 million payment would come back to us.
Makes sense, thank you.
Councilor Randall.
A somewhat depressing question, but we've heard from, like the hospitality industry about like meals and beverage and room tax. I guess the depressing question is, I'm like, seems like in the news, like tourism is already down and it's gonna continue to be down because of like, folks from out of the country not wanting to come to our country right now. Are we hearing from hospitality that's concerned, or are we hoping for the best, or?
Not at this time. We budgeted the numbers that were included in the governor's proposed budget, so which is typically what we do.
Okay.
And I will say this is a line that even when we were recovering from COVID, we've seen kind of steady growth in. So we're not concerned at this point in time, but things can change and, you really can't forecast anything.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, we're very comfortable with the numbers we have included in this year's budget.
Councilor Ted.
I don't see in here, and I didn't see before, I forgot to ask. Rescue fees, Like when you, rescue runs and fees, in other words, has that stayed the same over years or has it been increased?
No, that's been increasing pretty significantly. We'll be discussing that in the fire department,
Okay, jump.
session. Yeah,
Okay.
we moved both the fire details and, the fire rescue run revenue, out of the non-departmental budget in fiscal year 24, I believe, and into the individual departments that were generating the revenue.
Thank you.
And my final question was, distressed city revenue, why is that down?
So, it's based on a formula from the governor's office, and it's very, very complicated. It has to do with like, wealth in the, state versus in Providence, and then there's a pot and it's distributed. And so this is just kind of how the numbers shook out when we did the formula this year. There was no,
All right, thank you. Yes, sorry. No, no worries.
To be clear, could you just explain the info exemption reimbursement and kind of, you had said that the city was trying, or fought really hard
yeah.
to, either maintain that increase in reimbursement. Could you just kind of give us a little background about that exemption and why it was so hard to, fight to increase that?
Certainly, so, the tangible tax exemption was a $50,000 exemption at the state level in the governor's fiscal year 2024 budget that was going to be applicable in fiscal year 2025 revenues for cities and towns. When that legislation was passed, there was some language in it that caused the legislation to be interpreted in a way that would result in Providence receiving no reimbursement for the tangible tax exemption we were granting to our residents. And so we worked to clarify and recodify what the original intent of that legislation was, which was to make cities and towns whole for the exemption they were granting on their tax bills. And as a result of that, we are seeing that $6.1 million in revenue. Had that not happened last year, this $6 million would not exist. It would not be in our 26 budget, 25 budget, or in our 26 budget.
Wow.
Great. Page 14. No, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, look, just quickly, I know we talked about this briefly, not included in the numbers of this budget, but, we are anxiously hoping that the pending legislation would enable us to, charge tax on commercial parking spaces, remove the tax exempt status for short-term rentals that are rented in their entirety, and amend the school bus camera legislation to increase the amount of revenue that the city sees from those transactions.
And then in terms of timing, if those, even if all of them, in terms of timing, they wouldn't affect this year's budget, correct?
Yeah, I think we would have to take them on a case-by-case basis and do some analysis of like when the legislation passed, what the action items are, how long those things would take, but I wouldn't, bank on all of the estimated revenue being able to be added to the 2026 budget. Maybe some proportion of it could be, but, it's gonna depend on case-by-case basis, what's approved, when's approved, and how it's approved.
And do you have figures attached to each of these, what the potential amount of the revenue is?
I do not have them with me, but I could get that information.
Appreciate it, thank you. And I'd also like to recognize that we have Councilor Peterson joining us. Thank you so much, and can you, Madam Clerk, can you make sure that Councilor Peterson has a handout? And are we all ready to go to 14? Oh,
May I answer that question on revenue?
oh, yes, please. Yes, I'm going to have
the commercial parking tax, I believe the estimate is $1.7 million annually. The other two, short-term rentals. No one is exactly sure, it depends on how the cost is, so I'll move to look a little more into, but there are competing bills on that. And then the bus camera legislation also depends because the problem right now is the split between how much the vendor receives, how much the state receives, and how much the city receives. So it depends on what the new contract would be for a higher percentage to go to the city. And then one sizable item that's missing from this is a bill that the council president is pushing for with the support of the mayor, which is a ticket surcharge for large venues. It would be enabled in legislation, so council would have to pass an ordinance But the bill would enable municipalities to put a $2 surcharge per ticket at venues that have capacity for over 800 seats. And that would generate $2.63 million per year.
Thank you so much, Chief of Staff Rose. Thank you very much. Okay. Right, are we ready? Okay.
So it's 9:14. So the details of all of these line items are included in the budget book, and you can review them and follow up with questions if there are any. For the total Department of Revenue have increased by $3.7 million. Revenues related to fines and fees have increased by $1.7 million. Our tax stabilization agreement revenue has decreased by $777,000. That again does include $5.9 million for Roger Williams Medical Center. But I think one of the primary reasons for this decrease has to do with the commercial tax rate. So when the commercial tax rate is either increased or decreased, the assessor's office has to recalculate the tax stabilization agreement payments for almost every single one of our tax stabilization agreements. So if, for example, you negotiate an agreement where you were going to be paying 40% of what your tax would have been, and that assumed a tax rate of 35.10 when you had received this tax stabilization agreement, you are now paying 35% of the tax rate at 28. So you'll just get a little bit of a double benefit in that way. Additionally, local pilot revenues, which have been recently renegotiated, have been increased by $1.1 million. And there is no funding budgeted from here in New England, which is currently in negotiation.
I'm sorry, so the pilot revenues can include lifespan.
It includes lifespan, yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, we're going to take Councilor Vargas and then Councilor Reyes.
Do we know when we're going to be finished those negotiations with this, here in New England?
I'm not aware at this time. I believe they've started, but they're not, going to be solved.
Hopefully will be before June.
That would be wonderful.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councilor Reyes.
It's, Chair, just a process question, maybe you could answer this for me. If the city is able to get Care New England to contribute in pilot revenue, or let's say the ones we can't predict right now actually materialize, such as like tax and commercial parking or any other state enabling legislation revenue, if those things materialize, just a question on, do we as a body get notified of that extra revenue coming to the city? Like, was there a report of some sort? So just go, I know it goes right to the general fund essentially, but that access. of
How would that
revenue.
be handled if we did actually, some of these new revenue sources do come to fruition in fiscal year 26, how are we notified and how does that work?
So I think timing plays a role in that, right? So we're in this example, this is something that happens after we adopt the fiscal year 2026 budget, and there's a new revenue stream that arrives mid fiscal year. The finance department would include that in our operating report that we send to folks once a month. And so when you see the budget and the actuals and the projection, you would see that either a new revenue stream would show up as a projected revenue, or a existing revenue stream would show up with greater than anticipated revenues. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Now expenditures, we're gonna kind of do more of just a summary overview because we will get in the weeds on this when we get the individual departments. But in general, by category, this is how our $24 million has grown year over year. Salaries have increased by $3 million. Employee benefits have gone up by $9.5 million. A large portion of this is our pension and medical payments. Debt service has stayed relatively flat at $67,000. Our largest increase by far is our school appropriation, which has gone up by almost $11.5 million. Our utility expense has increased by $1.1 million, and just one little note on this. The $6 million you'll see reference for fiscal year 2026 is net of energy credit revenue. And so the number in the budget book on the expense side is $1.5 million higher, but there is $1.5 million in revenue to offset that expense. So this is the net cost of the energy. Services have remained relatively flat at $58,000. And I can say that this is something I don't think I've ever seen an increase in services at this low of an amount. And supplies have actually decreased by $897,000. Again, pretty significant considering the size of our budget and the amount of discretionary spending. Capital has gone down by about $1.6 million, and that has to do with the urgent capital improvements that were being funded by ARPA that are wrapping up this fiscal year.
Okay. I'm sorry, these services are what exactly?
Services are a category of expenditure in the appropriation ordinance. So while our budget book details all of the line items by individual account codes, they roll up into the category of either salaries, employee benefits, services, supplies, or capital. And so when I say total services, it is the sum of all of the accounts that roll up to services.
Yes, Councilor Henderson.
For the utilities line item, will we see, and remind me, I'm sorry, I know we've done this several years, but my brain, will we see the utilities in each of the departments lines, or will we only see that in like sustainability, and will we see?
We do bundle them all under the sustainability budget. It is a separate, so there's accounting units, like a cost center, and those we're actually, I think we're changing it this year because we're going to be rolling all of our utilities underneath sustainability and David's team so that they can really start managing, you know, all of our utility expenses and not just electricity. But they are not cost allocated to the individual departments.
Okay, and can I ask one other
Yes.
questions for sustainability, and yeah, David is a gift from God, so just love him, but do we pay utilities, so we have some vacant buildings that we own, do we have to pay utilities to keep like the heat on and things like that to keep pipes from freezing? Like, do we have a sense of like how much we pay for maintenance, not that kind of maintenance for empty buildings?
I'm sure that's something David could probably put together on the utility side in conjunction with public property. It's not information I have available at my fingertips, but I'm sure we could get something together.
Cool. Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Vargas.
Thank you. In salaries, why we're not $3 million?
Oh, you want a preview on the next page?
Okay,
Segue.
there goes, Paula's.
And most of it, well, yes, and actually the total COLA increase is $4.6 million. So there was some significant reductions in salaries to make the total salary change only $3.5 million because that category grew by 4.6. So really, there's about 1.6 million in salaries that was cut from the budget. To get to
And,
that amount.
Can I
Why don't we let them
finish?
just run through these first and then I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
So our salaries and fringe benefits are our largest costs in the operating budget. And so I thought it was important to just break down our large employee related increases. The largest is our, not the largest, but the first is our COLA increase. 1033 is currently in negotiations, and so we have budgeted them at 2.75%, which was the applicable COLA in fiscal year 2025. We have also included a COLA for non-union staff who are earning approximately up to $200,000 a year. That is cost of $428,000. That is also at 2.75%. Police contractual agreement required an increase of 4.25%. That is a cost of $1,749,899. And the contractually obligated fire COLA this year is 4% or $1,391,300. $1,391,382. Yeah.
That's what we've got in here.
Shelley voted in, it's in her purse.
Our medical insurance is our next, one of our next largest cost drivers.
It's a 3-family house.
Is increased by 6.93% or $3.4 million. This budget is set by an actuary who determines the required contribution based on the budget experience of the city's medical funds. And unfortunately, in fiscal year 2024, those funds did run a small deficit, which is causing us to need to contribute a little bit more in fiscal 2026 to make up for that. And you know, our pension payment, which is really our largest fixed cost and is just growing at a really unsustainable rate, is going up by 4.89% or $4.7 million.
Okay,
The total pension payment for the city is $96,479,551, which is almost a quarter of the levy. So 25% of the tax levy is strictly dedicated to pension. The total pension payment, when you add in the school department and water supply board and workforce solutions, is $117,805,000.
is this a good time to stop for questions? I'm gonna do Councilor Taylor, then Councilor Vargas.
So since we're on pension, where do we stand? I know we have that bond still hanging over that we can pull the trigger at some point in time, so I believe at the end of next year, is that right?
I believe it's all, yes.
Where are we? Are we close to that 5%? No, what is the number we need to actually get to?
Below 5%.
Okay, so I've been told below 5%, right?
Yeah.
But then I've heard 4.3%, so like how far, like, when would we start looking at that?
I think right now, the market is not in a very stable
No, I know,
place.
I know.
And so I'm not sure that would be the right move to make at this point in time. But it's something, I also like, it's not in the back of our minds, it's something we're constantly contemplating, and our chief financial officer is regularly looking at those rates and seeing if they come
But I'm
down.
saying if it gets like, I was told if it gets like you're saying below 5%. So let's say at the end of the year it goes to 4.75. I heard that was not good enough. We need to get down to 4.3.
I think the legislation said,
It says below 5%,
Yeah,
they'll say
yeah.
below 5, but I guess the numbers that Larry and those guys did was at 4.3 or 4.4, between
Yeah.
4.3, 4.5.
we stress tested all that, that percentage that you're referencing was built back during COVID when rates were at a very different place. And so that stress test and that model was built at that point in time with that data. We would need our investment advisors to like kind of reconfigure that entire stress test to see what that new percentage should be. But I do know the legislation has capped it at 5%.
Yeah, I agree too, because we also have that assumed rate of return at 7%, so you don't want to be borrowing at a higher rate than what the fund is actually earning.
Yeah.
And we have our Board of Investment Commission meeting on Thursday, but I anticipate that we are not earning anywhere close to 5 or 7% in our portfolio right now.
But if, let's say hypothetically, everything lines up and it goes to 4.75.
Mhm.
Would all this hurt us? Like as far as loans we get about the bond? Like we're A++, where we are now, would it hurt us to do that, or do you think at that point in time, depending, I mean, nobody knows what tomorrow's gonna be.
If the earnings in the fund aren't at least meeting that target of the debt service payment, then we are for us.
Okay.
Because our annual payment was so increased to meet for those losses. Right now, our annual payment is calculated based on a 7% assumed rate of return and like the market results from the prior year.
Right, which is terrible.
So-
Okay,
And before we get to Councilor Vargas, I'd just like to add, and are we going to be speaking about possibly re-amortizing the debt service? And is there anything that would prevent it from doing so?
Possibly, yeah. I think right now the market is really what
I understand that.
making it
Yeah.
uncomfortable. What I can say is the finance team has been meeting with our actuary to look at every possible strategy we could deploy. Any savings as a result of that would be felt in the fiscal 2027 budget year because the actuarial evaluations are 2 years out. So it is work that's kind of at the forefront of our mind, but right now with the, you know, again, the market uncertainty and all those things, it feels like it's perhaps a risky move. Particularly, you know, when our pension payments and our pension payroll out is not much lower than the amount of money we're putting in. And so we want to make sure that we always have enough funds on hand to make our payroll and continue to make our payroll so that pensioners are not adversely impacted by that.
We also, the city is under a funding improvement plan of our pension system, and so there's some, stipulations with that, we can't re-amortize until, I can't remember exactly, I can get the numbers to your internal auditor, but a certain percentage of funding, like 60% funding before we can even consider re-amortization without, I would assume, getting a state authority to do that.
If you could provide our internal auditor, that'd be great. Because I would like to, yeah, please. I'm sorry, I'd say, then we're going to Council Vargas, your question.
Thank you. On the proposal, the mayor did, he was mentioned that the people who's making over 100, they're not getting COLA, right?
That's correct.
So these 4.6 is people who doesn't make 100, under 100?
Well, the people who don't make, so the non-union staff who make less than $100,000 are $428,000. The $4.6 million is the total of all of the COLAs.
All the COLAs that,
So that's police COLA, fire COLA, 1033 and is the 4.6 million.
okay.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Sanders.
There's one. Can you just give the dollar amount for the pension contribution, with the other departments?
117-805-823.
Thank you.
Class A is,
Class A is essentially anyone that's not sworn police or fire.
okay,
So, you know, Sarah, the fraternal officer.
okay.
Well, as we know, and I've alluded to, a very, very large percentage of this budget is fixed. Just under 4% is what we would consider discretionary, and when we say discretionary, that's is things like animal food, check stock, and the grants line item in particular is included in the discretionary line. And so as you can see over time, and since fiscal year 2024, the fixed costs in our operating budget have increased by almost $50 million or 9%, where discretionary has decreased by $8 million or 27%. And so we're in a place now where our discretionary budget is approximately $22 million. The analysis was done on an apple-to-apple comparison, so we know that these numbers are true and accurate. And so there's really just, you know, I'm trying to just demonstrate that the amount of discretionary funding that we can continue to reduce is already being reduced. And there will become a point in time where if we're not generating more tax revenue, we will run out of things to cut, and we will have to start cutting the things that impact service delivery.
So I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? So under 4% is discretionary, is that what you said? Under 4%?
So yeah, the discretionary budget, if you can see in fiscal year 2026 is 22.5 million. That is 3.61% of the budget. In fiscal year 2024, that those same account for about 5.27%. Additionally, in this budget, there are some modest and very large investments. First and foremost, we have the contribution to PPSC. This is an increase of $11.4 million over the fiscal 2025 contribution, budgeted contribution. And really is one of the largest drivers in the increase in our budget. There is a modest increase to city year of $125,000, and that is to keep the program in one school because this organization has been informed that they will not be receiving any funding from Providence Public School District. And so this is the city's attempt to try to continue to support those students in one school. There is also new funding for Dorcas International to establish a 24/7 immigration legal helpline. That program has started in this fiscal year. There was some funding that we were able to allocate to that program, and we would like to codify it in the fiscal year 2026 budget. When we talk about housing and human services, we're going into a little more detail. But there's been $75,000 budgeted in their grant line item to offer as a matching, resource for any state or federal grants that open up in fiscal year 2026. There's been an increase to water fire of $50,000 to support this economic development entity. And World Cup 2026 is going to be coming to Gillette Stadium next summer. And so the city is trying to insulate and protect itself for some very probably expensive public safety costs of maintaining really safety in the city with a large volume of people coming in and visiting that area.
Yes, please.
Are, where in the budget, I guess, a few more questions, I'll ask them both at the same time. Where in the budget is that 250K going to live? And, does the budget then, and I'm sorry, I haven't told you guys the whole thing yet, but, provide for additional PEMA staff, given that, we're having both the World Cup and like historic flooding and things like that happening at the same time. So is that 250 going to PEMA, or where is that 250 going, and can it be used for staff?
It is going to FEMA, yes, and so we have budgeted under, a special events account code. So, you know, I think we would have to look at their salary line item and what we budgeted for salaries in FEMA versus, you know, where this account rolls up, which is most likely a service or supply line item. We're not supposed to exceed the appropriation line item by more than $5,000. But in this instance, you know, there's potentially opportunity that they have attrition savings that would allow us to hire somebody, or we need to have private contractors, but it was a very deliberate decision to put it in FEMA's budget for a lot of the reasons you just said. At this time, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what the city's response will need to be, but we do know that there will need to be a response, and we do know that we will need to keep our city safe, and so we felt like FEMA in this special event line item that was very discreetly presented and clear was the best place to put it.
And can I ask you a super quick
Yeah.
follow-up? I should know this, and I do not watch sports, so that is not softball. What time of year is the World Cup?
In the summer.
In June.
Okay.
That's what I
July.
thought, so just to add that, like, that's also when we're seeing like heat waves and all sorts of things, so maybe we have like a fully staffed FEMA, and this isn't just contractors or like services, seems like really important, because it's both like, you know, all the things, we'll talk about the FEMA budget when the FEMA budget comes up, but just seeing this like happening at the same time that we see all the other disasters is like, not that this is a disaster, it's great, come to the city, spend lots of money on restaurants, please, but like, I have nervous tummy about it.
Yeah, there's also a lot of festivals happening at that.
Yeah,
time.
like the perfect storm.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, I think it's great, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think go to
yeah.
the city is a wonderful thing. I was.
Come to the city, yeah, we love it.
Oh, I went for a walk
Hotels.
downtown when March Madness was here. It was wonderful. People were having.
Yeah,
great
love
time.
it.
We love to see it, but we want everyone to be safe. I mean, there's a bit of an added cost with that, and so it's a goal.
Yeah.
Madam Auditor.
No, she answered my question.
Okay,
Also,
Councilor Wyatt.
Yeah, just another World Cup question. Is it the entire summer or is it?
Thank you.
At Gillette, right?
It's at Gillette.
But we're.
Well, and that's part of it, is it's at Gillette Stadium, and so, you know, I'm obviously very pro Providence, but like, I think we wanna try to encourage as much
Yeah.
tourism here versus people having to go into Boston and deal with that.
Yeah.
Wonder if we have line PVD test for that.
That should be said, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Back
that's what-
to-
I think that's what we were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Councilor Pearson.
Thank you. I just wanted to add some context to the World Cup because I heard it as a point of contention for some people. Every city, every larger city is preparing in some sort of way for World Cup action. The goal, the amount, the millions of people that are expected to come to the province of Buffalo, Boston, et cetera, is expected to kind of break records for how much business we can benefit from. So it's not just the city of Providence is kind of trying to create some sort of an investment for this, but it's a good investment to have in the amount of return on investment.
Yes, I'll say, I've heard personally, that's the equivalent of 7 Olympics. It's a massive event. It's a great event, I mean, it is, you know.
Okay, and did you want to review page 22?
Sure. Next up, we have the One Stop Business Center, which is budget neutral, but a real reorganization of our licensing department and shifting some of the offices that are in City Hall down to 444 Westminster Street so that they can have a business service center for those entities. And the last item in the budget is a investment in a nighttime manager. This position is budgeted in arts, culture, tourism, and films budget. The annual cost of this position is about $68,000. And we will get into more details on that position, what it entails when you're reviewing police and arts, culture, and tourism. There. Is that it? Just a thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm just
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, is there any other questions?
My question is, how is Crystal Silva's there?
But really, this is the beginning of our, this is pretty thorough. I really do appreciate this. And so, we are meeting on Thursday. Please note that we're starting at 6. Yeah.
So we'll be here by Thursday.
Okay.
I'm going to make up out here by 35,
And we're gonna be planning inspections and standards and economic development, so. If you're interested, please, I mean, we're required, anyone else is also. Okay. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're gonna have, I'd ask for a motion to continue items number 2 through 6.
Second.
All right, motion made by Counselor Ingersoll, seconded by Counselor Taylor, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Counselor Taylor, seconded by Counselor Graves, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you so much.
in the picture.